Hello everybody, welcome into another lesson. So today we are going to talk about the circumference and area of circles. And for a lot of you this will probably be more like a review. But we've been talking about areas of regular polygons so far from the first 4 lessons. Today we're going to talk about circles. I'm sure by now everyone knows how to find the perimeter of a polygon. You just add up the sum of their sides. Well, how do you find the perimeter of a circle? The perimeter of a circle, because there's a debate in the math community. Is a circle truly an object with no sides? Or is it a polygon with infinite sides? That's been an ongoing debate since the dawn of time, but there is no definitive answer to that. But anyway, to find the perimeter of a circle, it's referred to as the circumference, which is denoted by capital C. The circumference, like a perimeter, is just the distance around the circle, around the outside of it. That is taken by multiplying 2 pi times your radius. And then the area, of course, the coverage of the whole circle is pi times the radius squared. So we're going to do some exercises here and then that'll be it. Today shouldn't be a terribly long lesson because this is pretty straightforward stuff. But in each of these exercises we're going to be given certain things here. In this case, we're given that the radius is 7. So the circle has a radius of 7. We have that. We need to find the circumference and the area. So if the circle has a radius of 7, let's start by finding the circumference. The circumference, of course, is going to be equal to 2 pi times that radius of 7, which would mean the circle would equal exactly 14 pi. If you wanted to leave your answer in terms of pi, sometimes you will, that would be your answer, that would be 14 pi. But if we want to get a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place, we're going to multiply in the calculator. Now, for those of you that don't remember, pi is approximately equal to 3.14. So if you take 14, multiply it by that, you'll get about 44. So the circumference of this circle is exactly 14 pi units, or approximately 44 units. Alright, now to find the area, you're just going to take, of course, pi, you'll multiply it by that radius of 7 to the 2nd power, which would then have to mean that the area is exactly 49 pi square units. If you were leaving your answer exact and leaving it in terms of pi, the answer would be exactly 49 pi. But we can get a decimal approximation to the nearest 1 decimal place, which would give you about 153.9 square units. I'm doing the decimal approximation so you can see about exactly how big it is with pi. So the circumference is approximately 44 units. The area is approximately 153.9 square units. All right. What do we got next? Big one. We have that the radius of this circle is 120 units, so that's going to be a big answer. So we need to find the circumference and the area with a radius of 120. So to find the circumference again, you'll take 2 pi times your radius of 120, which now, if we were going to leave the answer exact, you would get exactly 240 pi. but we're going to do a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place. Let's go ahead and do that, which would give you about 754 units. So the circumference of this circle would be exactly 240 pi, or approximately 754 units. Now to find the area, we're going to take pi, multiply it by that radius of 120 to the second power. Which this is going to be fun. Figure out what 120 to the second power is. I do not know that off the top of my head. I know 100 to the second power is 10,000, but I don't know what 120 to the second power is. I get 14,400. So the area would be exactly 14,400 pi square units. But in true fashion, we're going to get a decimal approximation of 1 decimal place. 14,400 times pi will give you approximately 45,238.9. So the area of this circle would be exactly a 14,400 pi square units, or approximately 45,238.9 square units. Alright, we're about to change it up a little bit here. Let's see what they give us this time. It's going to get a little bit interesting. Oh, nope, they still keep this. Alright. The radius is 5 halves. The radius is going to be 5 halves. What do we need to find? We need to find, of course, the circumference and the area. But you have a radius of 5 halves. So, in the end, we are going to do a decimal approximation, that's true. For simplicity's sake, though, because you want an exact answer first before you try to convert to a decimal, keep your radius the exact way it is. Don't convert the radius to a decimal just yet. Even though you would get exactly 2.5, let's leave it alone for a minute. So the circumference, of course, is equal to 2 pi times your radius, which is 5 halves. Well, we know the 2's are going to cancel out, so that means your circumference would be exactly 5 pi, but we need to get a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place. So the circumference is exactly 5 pi units, but what is 5 pi? It's approximately 15.7 units. So the circumference of this circle is exactly 5 pi units, or approximately 15.7 units. Now let's go ahead and find the area. The area, of course, is equal to pi times that radius of 5 halves to the second power, which means the area is going to be exactly 25 pi over 4 units, or square units, excuse me. 25 pi over 4 square units would be the exact area. But let's go ahead and find the decimal approximation of that. So 25 times pi, we get that, and then divide by 4, it's approximately 19.6. So the area would be exactly 25 pi divided by 4 square units, or approximately 19.6 square units is what you would get. Okay, now I think they changed what we're trying to find. They're going to give us something different this time. Let's see what they give us. No, we still have the radius. The radius is 6 times the square root of 2. So we have a radical in there. We have 6 times the square root of 2. We are going to find the circumference and the area. So, of course, let's start out finding our circumference. The circumference would be equal to 2 pi times 6 times the square root of 2, which means the exact answer for this is going to be 12 pi times the square root of 2 units. 12 pi times the square root of 2, which we'll do a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place. That 12 pi times the square root of 2 looks hideous, but that's what it is. That would give you about 53.3 units. So the circumference of this circle is exactly 12 pi times the square root of 2 units, or approximately 53.3 units. Now we'll find the area. The area, of course, is equal to pi times that radius of 6 times the square root of 2 squared, which is going to be equal to pi times 36 times 2, which means the area is exactly equal to 72 pi square units. But we want to get a decimal approximation here. So let's go ahead and do that. 72 pi is approximately 226.2 square units. So the area would be exactly 72 pi square units, or approximately 226.2 square units. Alright, this time for sure it changes what they give us. This time, we don't know the radius. We do not know the radius. That's one of the things we need to find. They give us that the circumference, in this case, is equal to 20 pi. So we already got the circumference. What do we need to find? We need to find the radius and the area. So find the radius and the area. So you were given your circumference of 20 pi, right? If you're trying to find your radius, leave the 20 pi alone. Don't convert it to a decimal. Just leave it alone. Because what you can do to find your radius is take the fact that a circle, the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. 2 pi r, in this case, the circumference was equal to 20 pi. So take the formula for the circumference of a circle, set that equal to your actual circumference. Well, if you divide both sides by 2 pi, you would get that the radius is 10. So the radius is 10 units. We found the radius. That was easy enough. Now we can find the area since we know the radius. The area, of course, is equal to pi times that radius of 10 to the second power, which would give you an area of exactly 100 pi square units. Then we can do a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place, will give you about 314.2. So the radius of this circle is 10 units. The area is exactly 100 pi square units, or approximately 314.2 square units. Alright. That's not going to change, but the number is. Alright, we have another one where they give us this time that the circumference of the circle is 12 pi. We need to find the radius in the area. That's not so bad. Again, we know the circumference, we just don't know the radius or the area. So first, always start out by finding your radius then. You're going to take that formula for the circumference of a circle, which would be 2 pi r. You're going to set that equal to your actual circumference of 12 pi. Then you could just solve for r, divide both sides by 2 pi. You would end up getting that the radius is 6. So the radius of this circle is 6 units. Now we can find the area quite easily since we know the radius. The area, of course, is pi times that radius of 6 to the second power, which to get the exact area would be 36 pi square units. Then we can do a 1 decimal place approximation of that. Which would give you about 113.1 square units. So the radius of the circle was 6 units. The area of the circle was exactly 36 pi square units, or approximately 113.1 square units. I got 2 more exercises and we're done for the day. I told you this wouldn't be a very long lesson. Alright, what did they give us this time? They give us that the area is equal to 25 pi square units. So this time we know the area. What we don't know is the radius or the circumference. So we need to find the radius and the circumference. But we do know the area to be 25 pi square units. Well, first thing, again, like we did with the previous 2 exercises, start by finding your radius. You can't find the circumference without it, so find your radius first. In this case, you'll take the formula for the area of a circle, which is going to be pi r squared. You'll set that equal to your actual area, which is 25 pi. Now you start out by solving for r squared. You divide both sides by pi, you get that r squared equals 25. And of course you're going to have a quadratic. You take only the positive square root since we're dealing with a length. Since there's no such thing as negative length, you would get that the radius is 5 units. So the radius is equal to 5. Now we can find the circumference quite easily. Circumference is going to be equal to 2 pi times that radius of 5, which means the circumference for an exact value is 10 pi, which now we can do a 1 decimal place approximation of 10 pi would give you about 31.4. So the circumference of this circle is exactly 10 pi units, or approximately 31.4 units. And I got just 1 more, then we're done. Okay, this time we got that the area is 50 pi square units. So the area of the circle is 50 pi square units. We still need to find the radius and the circumference. Well, we don't have a prayer finding the circumference unless we find the radius first. So since you know the area, take the formula for the area of a circle, which would be pi r squared. Set that equal to your actual area, which would be 50 pi. And then of course, solve for r squared, divide both sides by pi, you get that r squared equals 50. And then, of course, you have to take the positive square root of both sides. R would equal the square root of 50, but this can be simplified, right? Because r would equal the square root of 25 times the square root of 2, which means then that the radius is going to be 5 times the square root of 2 units. And in this case, I would not do a decimal conversion. We'll do that with the circumference, but when you have a radius, you probably want to get the exact answer. So the radius is 5 times the square root of 2 units. Now we can easily find the circumference. Circumference is equal to 2 pi times that radius of 5 times the square root of 2, which if we were to do an exact value of the circumference, it would equal 10 pi times the square root of 2 units. But let's do a decimal approximation to 1 decimal place. That would give you about 44.4 units. So the circumference of this circle with a radius of 5 times the square root of 2 is exactly 10 pi times the square root of 2 units, or approximately 44.4 units. So that's it for circumference and area of a circle. Next lesson, we're going to talk about arc lengths and areas of sectors of a circle. So I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.